Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we fished ourselves a really weird one on the PS2, and that happens to be Glass Rose. So the game was developed by Sing and published by Capcom of all people, and it was released in 2003 in Japan and 2004 in Europe, and it was not released in North America. Now, in case you're not familiar with the company Sing, this was actually their very first game. But retrospectively, they have put out other games that have gained some cult statuses, such as Another Code, Two Memories, Hotel Dusk, Room 215, and probably their most popular, Little King's Story on the Wii. So I always find it interesting to take a look at a company's first game. And it is considered as a point-and-click adventure mixed with a mystery thriller. Now, it may seem kind of weird that Capcom published a game like this, but believe it or not, before this game, they did indeed publish a game on the PS1 called Fox Hunt, and all I gotta say about that is that it's very special. But anyways, one quick thing before we talk about the game, and this is something I feel like I have to comment on this, even though it's not really a critique of the game itself, is that just look at the cover art for the game. Okay, maybe it's not the worst, but it is at least better than your typical Master System and TurboGrafx-16 cover arts, but why did they have to make this look like it's some, like, trashy teen romance shit? You know exactly the ones I'm talking about, the ones that are obviously shit and everyone hates on them, but yet they somehow make a shitload of money and also win lots of awards that are bogus anyways. But with the cheesy covers aside, now let's finally talk about the game, and we're gonna talk about the game's story. So the game originally takes place in 2003, where two characters named Takashi and Emi are reporters that want to visit an abandoned mansion where apparently there was an unsolved murder that happened there many years ago. So while they're just looking around, Emi goes to a corner and just disappears. And then Takashi ends up following her, and he ends up disappearing as well. And the confusion just begins from here. So what happened is that they end up going back to the past 70 years ago, within the same mansion, and everyone is still alive, but the weirdest shit is that Takashi is not Takashi. I mean, he looks like Takashi, but instead everyone remembers him as Kazuya. And no, not Kazuya from Tekken. Oh, and speaking of references to other games, don't you think this iconic duo looks familiar at all? Possibly something that is very Sega related and also very Japanese looking? Yeah, you know what I'm thinking. So anyways, Takashi is now known as Kazuya in this time. So Kazuya happens to be one of the sons that belonged to Mr. Yoshinondo, who was the one that was killed and was never solved. So there's a lot of other characters that are within the mansion as well, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about each and every one of them, just to give you some basic ideas what to expect. So you have a fancy butler guy, you got a maid, you got an actress, you got a director guy, you got a kid who is very shy and only likes doing puzzles, an investigator guy, and of course there is the investigator guy's assistant. And finally, I'll mention, is a greedy piece of shit who doesn't care about his dad dying, but instead only wants it for his fortune, because like I said, he's a piece of shit. And funny enough, his name is actually Hideo, and it makes me wonder if the developers named him that just to troll Hideo Kojima. Because it's pretty obvious that that guy likes to troll everybody, so it's kinda different to see someone troll him. But maybe it was coincidental, but I like to think it was the other way around. But anyways, there's a couple other characters, but I'm not going to get too much into it there, because learning about the characters is really a big part about the game. And just like a very popular series known as Danganronpa, this series, as the more you progress through the game, more characters will get killed off one by one, therefore making the mystery of the death of Mr. Yoshimondo even more complex. Since because other characters are also getting murdered, which pretty much turns this game into a whodunit situation. Now you're probably wondering, where the hell is Emi in all this? Well, she is around, but she's kind of around in like a ghost form where only Takashi can see her and hear her voice, but no one else. So yeah, the story in this one is actually really interesting, but at the same time, it's also a bit of a confuction. I'll get back to this near the end of the video, but it's pretty obvious that because this does have to do with time travel, you can only imagine that there is going to be some weird plot holes around. So now, let's talk about the game's gameplay. So it's a point and click where you don't directly control the character, you just gotta click on where you need to go and that's where he goes. And you can interact with a lot of different stuff within the backgrounds. And as you can tell, it's a game with 3D characters within pre-rendered backgrounds. And it really does remind me a lot of Siberia on PC. So just like most of these games, you can pick up items, you can pick up different notes that you can read, but one of the main items that you will usually see scattered throughout the mansion are the heart fragments. So what the heart fragments do is that if you collect enough of these, you can actually unlock the true ending, which obviously has to do with Ghosty Emmy. Now one of the other main aspects to this game, other than walking around clicking everywhere, is interacting with the other characters. So this is the part of the game where it kind of feels like a detective game. So after a character that you're talking with says something, it'll show it to you in one text block where you gotta select the word, and when you select that word, your character will ask that character about what they said. And depending on the word that you ask them about, it can actually branch off into different pathways within the conversation. But don't worry, you can always go back to a previous text box if there is a word that you missed. So of course, the main purpose of this is supposed to get to know the characters a bit more that you're interacting with, but also does progress through the story, since whenever you're done talking with them, either an event will happen or you will gain some sort of item. Also, it is important to know, and this thing I haven't even talked about yet, is that apparently our main character can read minds. Well, sometimes. So when you want to read someone's mind, you gotta highlight the word in the green. But you can only do it on specific words, and figuring that out is kinda hard. Even if you're on the easy mode, which allows the cursor to glow on whatever word you want, and also when you're exploring on a thing that you can interact with, I gotta say, for someone like me who really sucks at literature, I had to use a guide for this because I actually really struggled with this at the beginning part very badly. I guess you can say if I was a part of the literature club, Miss Monica would be severely disappointed in me. Well, it's okay, my ass would get deleted anyways, but going back on track to Glass Rose, talking to characters can be pretty difficult sometimes, even if you are on the easy mode. I mean, easy mode does make it a hell of a lot easier, but I still kinda struggled with it here and there. And as for the mind reading thing, whenever you use it, it actually does take away some mind points. And in case you're wondering what the mind points is, it's essentially your health of the game. So every time you use it, your health does drain a little bit, but don't worry though, it usually doesn't happen enough where you're actually gonna fucking die. Especially that whenever an hour passes within the game, it does actually gain up a little bit, so that is helpful as well. Yeah, one other thing that is important to mention with this game is that every section of the game takes place within an hour within the game itself. So if you start dicking around in the game and the music starts playing faster and faster, that usually means that time is almost going to be up, and once the time's up and you didn't do all the objectives that you needed to do, then that means you get to go all the way back to the beginning of the last hour that you were doing. So technically, yes, there is a time limit, and you know, those things do kind of piss me the fuck off. But thankfully, I find that the timing in this game, at least on easy mode, is actually pretty forgiving, since it takes quite a while to get to a full hour within game time. And believe it or not, I've actually never encountered this, so I guess I got lucky there. But I'm just letting you know that yes, there is technically a time limit in this game, but it's not the worst time limit I've ever seen. I mean, this could have been way fucking worse. And it does make sense that they do separate parts of the game within every hour of the block, because this game only takes place within like 3 days in game time. So it starts from October 22nd to October 24th. Now, one last thing to talk about with the gameplay is the suspense events. So to sum this up, it's basically quick time events, but instead of pressing the right button at the right time, and of course if you fuck up you gotta do it all over again, instead what will happen is that your character will be in danger, and there'll be some different things that will pop up, like an action, and you gotta click on that action, but you have to do it in such a very short time, where if you don't do anything, well, you die. Or if you do something, if you click the right one, nothing will happen and things will continue smoothly. And if you click on the wrong one, you could either get instantly killed or you'll lose a lot of mind points. So think of it as a multiple choice question, but it's done like super frickin' fast. So that sums up the gameplay, so now let's talk about the game's controls. And I gotta say, they are pretty good for the most part. So moving around the cursor with the controller is actually really easy and is responsive. It doesn't feel jerky at all. And it's just very simplistic. I really don't need to explain much about the exploration. But as for talking with other characters, I will say the button layout for this part was a little bit weird at first because to bring up the branching with other text boxes, you gotta press L2. I don't know why, and of course L2 also takes you out of the conversation itself, so that was another thing I thought was kind of weird. So the blue highlight is the X, and the green highlight, which is the mind reading, is for triangle. So once you know that, it's pretty freaking easy. And I don't really have much complaints, other than the fact that sometimes if you're covering over certain words, sometimes if you go like one over, like let's say if you cover a exclamation mark or a question mark or something, it won't count, which is really fucking weird. So you have to make sure to cover the exact word that it wants. If you go like a space over, it's just not gonna count. You gotta cover it over properly. And that sucks, but you do get used to it though. And quick little mention I have to say, even though this has nothing to do with controls, is that the loading in this game is actually really good. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, it takes like at least like a second to like load up a new area. I was really impressed. So after a couple minor things, the controls are really good and really easy to use, and I'm just glad that they don't feel jerky because that's usually a big common problem with a lot of games with cursors, with controllers. So now, let's get moving on and start talking about the graphics, and the graphics in this one, if I say so myself, I actually do like them. Now obviously, this isn't like the greatest looking PS2 game you'll ever play, but I just like the style to it. So just like a lot of games I've reviewed before that also have pre-rendered backgrounds, I really like it a lot, and I also love it in horror games, and also one of my all-time favorite games, Shadow Hearts, also on PS2, has it as well, and I really loved it there too. And I do find that the mansion is pretty nice looking, like I think it's actually a pretty cool looking one. And also some of the rooms in this mansion are actually named after different flowers, hence the name Glass Rose. Also, the game's CG cutscenes are really well done for 2003. Obviously, that doesn't look as good as Haunting Grounds, but it's pretty damn good. My only complaint with the graphics are the character models within the gameplay. Some of them just look kinda off with this game. Also doesn't help that a lot of them are pretty bland character designs, so really, the only thing that I can really remember this game when it comes to character looks is that the main character looks like Ryo from Shenmue, so yeah, there is that. But other than that one thing, everything else I really do like, and I understand that this kind of style felt really dated at the time, but I don't know, for some reason, I still really like the way how this game looks. So now, let's get moving on and start talking about the music. So the music in this game really fits with the tone of it, where it is very atmospheric and does also suit with the settings. Now, most of the music may not be very memorable, there's no catchy tunes or anything like that, but one song that always did get stuck in my head ever since I went to that area was the song that plays in the garden sections. It's a very relaxing sounding song, and it's probably my favorite within the game. But that doesn't mean that the rest of the music was bad though. Everything else, worked really well, and I found that there was a few moments where the tension was really well done. And that's pretty great, but keep in mind, this game is not scary whatsoever, at least I never found it to be scary though, but I did found that a lot of the tense moments though were at least really well done for what they were. So overall, the music is really good and does fit the game perfectly, which I do think is important for a game within this style. So now, as for the game's voice acting, oh man. Oh yeah, the voice acting in here is really bad, but it's actually fucking hilariously bad. In fact, if it reminds me of anything, it actually sounds a lot like the voice acting within Shenmue. So you know, you're gonna hear a lot of the same lines repeated, and of course they're like recorded and like put to like another line, so it just feels like they just recorded it once. and everyone just sounds super awkward and weird about everything. It's pretty great, and I just love that kind of shit personally. And from what I discovered from the cast, it's actually really surprising of how many voice actors were in here that I actually recognized. I'm not going to go too much into detail about it though, because there is quite a few characters here, but I'll go over the main ones. So the main character, Takashi, or, Kazuya, is being played by Eric Kelso. Now, in case you're not familiar with his roles, probably one of the most infamous roles that he does is that he plays Captain Falcon in F-Zero GX. Like, what? So you got a guy who looks like Ryo from Shenmue, has the name of Kazuya, and he is voiced by Captain Falcon. Like, isn't that just fucking awesome? And then Emmy is being played by Lisa Wilkerson, and she actually played Joy from Shenmue 2. So yeah, we got more Shenmue within this shit. And two last ones I will mention because they're really fucking funny to me is that Barry Gijerd, I hope I pronounced that right, probably not, but in case you don't know, that dude is the original Barry Burton. Yep, the one that says, "You almost became a Jill sandwich." And finally, I'll mention is Jeff Mannings, who has done the narration for the original Super Smash Bros. Yep, he's in here too. So if you've played many great games from the early PS2 days and the PS1 days that have some really cheesy ass voice acting, well, this game has it all. And I love it. No, I mean, I really love it. Nah, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, though, I do think it is pretty fucking great that this game has, some of, the greatest, cheesiest voice actors ever. So now, if you wanted to go out and buy this game, if you're from North America, you're gonna have to import this one, since this game is not released over here, and of course you have to have a way to play it. Man, why can't PS2s be region-free? That's fucking shit. Well anyways, from the European copies that I've seen, the cheapest I've seen this go for is about $30, and I've seen some for $35, and a couple for about $40. So yeah, it is a bit more expensive for a used PS2 game, but it's not as overpriced as I was thinking it was gonna be. I don't know, for some reason I was expecting this to be like an $80 game or some shit. But the good thing is that if you do want to emulate this game, it actually runs perfectly fine on the PS2 emulator, which is always great stuff. But that's of course if your computer can handle the PS2 emulation stuff. So now, as for my overall thoughts on this game, Glass Rose is... man, this game is fucking weird as shit. And I'll be honest, reviewing a game like this was not easy. Now, I have reviewed games like D on Sega Saturn and The Mansion of Hidden Souls on the Sega CD, which have some similar elements to this game, but not quite. But even those were kind of challenging to review because the games were mostly about story than they were on gameplay, just like this one. And I don't want to give away any spoilers, even though I know this game is old, but the thing is, it's not like this game will ever be as popular as Star Wars. But with that said, here's what I gotta say. The game is decent at best, I'll say that, but even some parts about it were kinda average. Best comparison for how the story is told is that it's very much like a roller coaster where the beginning part is very slow and then it starts getting good, stuff, and then it slows down and gets a little bit boring, and then it picks back up again and starts getting good, and it pretty much does that back and forth every so often. And even though I do like the main concept of the game, doing the whole conversations with different characters, while it was interesting, it definitely got really tedious after a while, since there is a lot of it, and some of them can last for quite a while, so it can be very fatiguing. And one thing I really don't understand is that why does the game not keep track of the amount of heart fragments that you have? You never know how much you're gonna have unless you look at the picture of where it shows Emmy with a different emotion. So you never know exactly how much you have, and you don't know exactly how much you need to get the true ending. And just by the way, there are 4 endings in the game. There's a bad ending, a good ending, the open ending, and the perfect ending, which is the true one. So as you can tell already, this game is really hard to recommend to people because it's just so fucking weird and different. And obviously, there's not a whole lot of action in the game, so if you want action, then obviously this is not the game for you. But for the first game that came out of the company Sing, it's really not bad, but it's also not great either, but it's definitely could have been a hell of a lot worse. Although I will say, speaking of Sing, it's definitely not as good as the other DS games that I mentioned, Hotel Dusk and Trace Memories, but for a start, it's not bad, and it is very interesting, and of course, this game can be entertaining for me because, you know, the cheesy-ass voice acting. And I did praise quite a few other things, like the graphics and the music. So yeah, Glass Rose is decent at best. Not great or amazing, but also not horrible and alright terrible. And just by the way, when this game came out, it actually got a lot of bad reviews, and I can see why. I mean, this game does have quite a few issues, and of course I can see people just not giving a shit about the story. But you can call me a little lenient on it, mostly because I did enjoy parts of the game. I'm not gonna lie, there were parts of the game that I actually did like. It's just hard to recommend for other people, but either way, I think this will just be one of those games that I do like a little bit more than most people do, but I definitely don't love it though, I will say that. So with that being said, that'll take us to the end of the review, so thanks for watching, commenting, and have yourselves a great day. Take me down to the paradise city where the ass is green and the girls are shitty. Take me, oh yeah.